Welcome back, junior historians. So, have you ever looked at a simple list of dates and thought, oh, I totally know the story these are telling, only to find out you were literally completely wrong? Well, today we are putting on our detective hats in this explainer to investigate the ultimate historical trap, which is the timeline illusion. We're going to open up some actual files from the 1970s and see how a simple sequence of dates can absolutely trick us if we aren't careful. It's time to separate fact from fiction.
Okay, let's kick things off with a slightly ridiculous question. If I eat a delicious sandwich and then it immediately starts pouring rain outside, did my sandwich, cause the rain? Obviously, no way. But here's the thing. In history, we make this exact same mistake all the time. We see an event happen one year and another event happen the very next year, and we just automatically assume that first event caused the second. Today, we're going to see why that assumption is pretty much one of the most dangerous traps you can fall into.
So here is our roadmap for today's explainer. 1. The timeline trap. 2. Chronology versus causation. 3. Building your CER. 4. Student check. And 5. Lesson recap.
All right, moving right into section 1, the timeline trap, spotting the illusion.
So, going back to our sandwich and the rain, the absolutely crucial point here is that just because event A happens right before event B, it doesn't mean event A actually caused it. Timelines are fantastic for showing us when things happen, but honestly, they're terrible at telling us why. Event A happening before event B, it might just be a complete coincidence. If we just assume cause and effect based on dates on a calendar, we literally miss all the real human decisions and dramatic motives behind world events. To find that why, we have to look past the dates entirely.
Section 2, Chronology versus Causation, digging into the evidence.
Okay, this beautifully illustrates the difference between knowing the order of events and understanding their real connection. So over on the left, we have chronology. That's the when. It's reading left to right across the timeline, 1971, then 1972, then 1973. But on the right, that is causation. That's the why. That's actually connecting the dots. Finding causation means acting like a real detective and diving straight into the primary sources. We can't just trace a line with our finger. We actually have to read the text to find out what motivated people to act.
Let's put this into practice and look at the chronology of the 1973 energy crisis. Reading left to right, we see President Nixon announced a domestic energy strategy in April 1973 to boost oil production, right? Then, just a few months later, in late 1973, Arab members of OPEC instituted this massive oil embargo against the U.S., banning petroleum exports entirely. Now, if you fall into the timeline trap, you might look at this and assume Nixon's April strategy directly caused that late 1973 embargo, just because it happened first. I mean, it looks like a super clear sequence, doesn't it? But is that the whole story?
Well, actually, scratch that. To find the truth, we got to hit the history books. Documents from the Office of the Historian proved the embargo wasn't about Nixon's April energy plan at all. It was actually in retaliation for the United States resupplying the Israeli military during the Arab-Israeli War that broke out that fall. Plus, the embargo was used to gain leverage in the post-war peace negotiations. So the timeline completely hid the real motive. Only the text reveals the true cause and effect, which hits the nail on the head as to why we always have to dig deeper.
Section 3. Building your CER, the worked example.
All right, so as historical detectives, we use the CER framework, that's claim, evidence, and reasoning, to organize our findings and build a totally airtight case. First up is your claim, which is your direct answer to a historical question. Next is your evidence. These are the hard facts and quotes pulled straight from your sources. And finally, the really important part, your reasoning. This is where you explain exactly how your text evidence proves a real link between events, which helps you dodge that timeline trap entirely. Your reasoning is basically the glue that connects the calendar dates to the actual human motivations.
Let's test this out on President Nixon's domestic environmental policies. Looking at the timeline, we see a massive, devastating oil spill off the coast of Santa Barbara in 1969. Then, the very next year, 1970, the government completely springs into action. They sign the National Environmental Policy Act, the Clean Air Act to cut down on car emissions, and they establish the EPA. Now, did the 1969 disaster actually cause all this 1970 legislation, or is it just another chronological coincidence? Let's build our CER to find out.
So by combining our timeline sequence with text directly from the National Archives, our CER really comes to life. Our claim is that environmental tragedies directly led to federal government reorganization. Our evidence notes the chronology, the 1969 spill happening right before the 1970 laws. But our reasoning is what seals the deal here. The source text confirms the 1969 Santa Barbara oil spill actually served as a galvanizing environmental tragedy. And because of that, Nixon explicitly signed an executive order reorganizing the government to establish the EPA. It wasn't a coincidence at all. The text proves the cause for sure.
Section 4. Student check. Your turn to investigate.
Okay, notice this complex flow of events on the timeline for the end of the Vietnam War. In 1969, U.S. troop withdrawals begin. But then, in 1970, there's a major incursion into Cambodia. By 1972, the U.S. responds to the North Vietnamese Easter Offensive with massive B-52 bombings. And finally, in January 1973, a peace agreement is signed.
So, based on your sources, did the 1969 troop withdrawals directly cause the 1973 peace agreement? If you only looked at the timeline, you might just say, yeah, of course. But what does the Office of the Historian text actually say? It reveals that the North Vietnamese didn't engage in serious negotiations until their 1972 offensive was stopped by massive reinforcements. In fact, Nixon ordered those massive B-52 attacks in late 1972 specifically to break a deadlock in the peace talks. So the true causation is way more complex than just withdrawals equals peace. You really need the text to see the whole picture.
Section 5, Lesson Recap. Case closed.
To wrap up our explainer today, the big takeaway is that you absolutely need both timelines and text evidence to prove a historical claim. Timelines, they give you the essential when, the basic framework of chronology. But you must dive into the historical texts to find the why, the actual causation. By organizing your thoughts with claim, evidence, and reasoning, your arguments will be backed by solid historical facts, not just chronological coincidences. Whatever you do, don't fall for the timeline trap.
So next time you see two events sitting side by side on a timeline, ask yourself, are you just going to assume the cause or are you going to investigate the evidence? History isn't just a list of dates you have to memorize. It's this massive, fascinating puzzle of human decisions. Stay curious, keep reading those primary sources, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.